Hello friends, today I'm going to solve LeetCode problem number 1822, sign of the product of an array. In this problem, we are given a function, sign function, that would return the value 1 if x is positive, -1 if x is negative, and 0 if the value of x is equals to 0. Now we are given here an integer array nums, and we need to get the product of all the values in the array nums, and then based on the product we are going to return the value 1 if the product is positive, -1 if the product is negative, 0 if the product is equals to 0. So that is what we are going to do. Now let's see how we could solve that problem. We are given the array nums. Okay, so let's take that array and then let's try to figure out how we could solve it. Okay, so what we could do is, one thing is that we take the product of each of these elements, right? So basically we start a for loop and start iterating from the first index. So initially our product would be initialized to 0 and then every time we multiply an item to it, our product will change, right? So we have the value 1 and now we are taking the first element and multiplying. So now our new value is equals to -1. Next we multiply with the second value, so -1 times -2 is equals to 2, because negative times negative is a positive, right? Now 2 times -3 is equals to -6. Okay, again -4 times -6. Since there are two negative values, we always get a positive value, so that would be 6 4 equals 24, right? Now 24 times 3 is equals to what is that value? 3 4 equals 12, 1 3 2 is 6, so that's 72, right? Now next 72 times 2 will be equals to 144. Okay, and then the last item here is equals to 1, so 1 times 144 is equals to 1. Okay, now we see that this value is positive, right? Since it is greater than 0, we check if it's greater than 0, so we return a value 1. If it were less than 0, we would have returned -1 to indicate that it's a negative value, and if it was equals to 0, we would have returned the value 0. All right, so this is one way we could do it. But like, to identify, we just need to identify if the value is positive or negative, right? And then return the corresponding value. So we know that two products, a product is negative if there are odd number of elements that are negative. Okay, and it is, in that case it is negative. That would mean that it is a negative value. Similarly, a product is positive if there are even number of elements in our array. Okay, so let's take an example here. So we already have an example. So how many number of elements here are negative? 4, right? So since 4 number of elements are negative, that would result us in a positive value, positive product. Now here only one element is negative, right? But we have a value 0 as well, so basically 0 multiplied by any positive or negative number is equals to 0, so we just return output 0. Now let's see here, the number of elements that are negative is equals to 3, right? We have 3 elements negative, which means that the product would be equals to -1. Okay, I mean the product would be negative, so our output would be -1. All right, so all we need to do is count the number of negative elements and see if there are any 0 values. If we find a 0, then we are going to return a 0. Else, if we found odd number of negative elements, then we return -1, else we return a positive value. Okay, so that's all we are going to do. So let's start coding. Okay, before that, let's also look at our constraints. Okay, let's look at our constraints. So the length is at least 1 and the value is minus 100 to 100. Okay, so just in case, we just are going to check for base case. So if length is less than 1, then that would mean that there are no elements. We're just going to return null. Okay, we just return nothing. Now let us define our count. That would keep count of negative elements. So let us write negative count. Okay, neg count. Now we are going to iterate over each of the number of nums, and if num equals 0, we are just going to return 0, because that would mean that if one element is 0, then the whole product would be 0, right? Now else if num is less than 0, that would mean that it is a negative number, so we are going to increment the count. Else we are just going to do nothing. Okay, so we just don't do anything. Now we check. So if it were a 0, we would return it from here. If it were there are no 0 elements, then at the end we just check the count. Okay, so we are just going to return count. To check if it is an odd number or not, we just go to a modulo with 2, and if it is odd, then modulo 2 would be equals to 1. That would result in a value true. So this would result in a true if it is 1, and then we're just going to return minus 1. Else if it is even number, then we're just going to return 1. So that's all about this. Let's try to run our code. Oh, so we got an error. So we defined it neg count, right? I just forgot that. Let's submit this now. Okay, talking about the time complexity, we have a for loop here, right? Okay, we have a for loop here, so that would mean that we are iterating over each of the element in num's array, right? So that means the time complexity is O of n and the space complexity is constant here. So that's all about this problem. Hope you liked my solution. Let me know in the comments down below, and please don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot for watching until the end.